please.
Okay, good afternoon, members. Just before we start the official agenda and business, I would just like to say that this is Mrs. Maley's, our clerk's, last meeting of this committee. What I am pleased to say is she's remaining within the Council in Legal and Democratic Services, but going to another post. So on our behalf, and you can all make a contribution if you want, Karen, it's been a pleasure, as it is with all the clerks, and various people in here have chaired several committees of this Council, but it's always been a pleasure to have your support and your sitting to my left-hand side and keeping me right. So all the best in your new post from us all. Does anybody else want to add to that? Or yes, of course. Of course.
Thank you all.
You're welcome. Okay, members, I would like to welcome you all to this hybrid meeting of the Scrutiny and Audit Committee and remind all attendees that this meeting is being recorded and webcast live on the Council's YouTube channel. I have agreed the attendance of some members remotely and would remind all attendees to mute their microphones when not speaking. Please raise your hand or electronic hand when you wish to speak. Please do not speak during items unless I invite you to speak. Thank you very much. Mrs. Maley, are there any apologies and substitutions, please?
Thank you, Convener. Apologies from Councillor Gregg, Councillor Gavin Nicholl and Councillor Louise Nicholl today with no substitutes. Also, we have Councillors Proctor, Doran, Gall and Vaughan joining the meeting remotely, and all other members of the committee are present in the chamber.
Thank you very much. Members, any declarations of interest or statements of transparency? No. Okay, thank you. Agenda item number 3, the minutes of the previous meeting. They've been submitted for approval as a correct record. The minute of the meeting of this committee of the 25th of April 2023. Do we agree that they are a correct record? Okay, thank you. And the first item of business on the agenda, official business, is the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service quarterly monitoring report for the period 1st of January 2023 to the 31st of March 2023. And welcome to the local senior officer, Jason Sharp, and the group commander, Mark Lowe. And I think there's another fire service colleague here as well. Yes, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you and good afternoon, everyone. As introduced there, local senior officer for the area, for the wider Tayside area, up here to introduce the scrutiny report for Angus. Accompanied by, as you say, Group Commander Mark Lowe and Station Commander Cammy Sands is here to talk more about our community safety engagement matters. So, feels really quite strange to be in a physical meeting. First scrutiny for me physically, so thanks very much for having us here. Really, I'm going to hand over to Mark to go through the scrutiny report, and then we'll collectively answer any questions that you may have. You'll recall within the appendix, there's often quite a lot of community safety engagement work and activity work. That's why Cammy's here. Cammy leads on that on our behalf within the wider Tayside area, but we thought it would be really good to bring him in today to allow you to ask some questions, let him present that information, because he's got that real rich detail that sits behind it. Also, you'll be aware that we've put a briefing session in for next week. There's been an announcement quite recently about some changes to the crewing within the wider Tayside and within the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service. So we've put a session in next week with Mark and myself and our service delivery model programme experts going to attend next week. And we're going to go through that detail there and answer any questions next week, if that's okay. I'll just hand over to Mark.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you, Chair. If I could take the membership straight to page 17 of the combined meeting pack and talk through each of the headline indicators. Again, for quarter 4, January through March, the incidents attended by Scottish Fire and Rescue Service in Angus were 360, and across the year to date is 1,667, which equates to just under 5 a day and 32 a week by the 6 stations and 11 appliances within the Angus area. So headline indicator 1, accidental dwelling fires. There were 21 accidental dwelling fires during Q4, which is in line with the 3-year average for the quarter. The majority were classed as low severity, with 10 of the 21 starting in the kitchen and being contained within that compartment. A total of 60 incidents throughout the year to date, 2002 to 23, which is below the annual target of 78. Again, the majority were from cooking, faulty electrical appliances, and 3 combustibles stored too close to a heat source. Headline indicator 2, accidental dwelling fire fatal casualties. Sadly, we had a single fatal fatality within this reporting period, and at this time I'm unable to provide any further information as our fire investigation teams are awaiting the post-mortem results being released by the Procurator Fiscal's Office. Once these are received, there will be a case conference to ensure any learning from that event is shared across all partners. Headline indicator 3, accidental fire dwelling fire non-fatal casualties. Sadly, again, we've had a single fire-related injury within this reporting period, which takes the total number for 3 for the year to date, which is below the annual target. From both these unfortunate incidents and remaining 19 accidental dwelling fires, crews and the Angus Community Action Team have carried out 329 home fire safety visits across Angus to help reduce the likelihood of similar incidents happening moving forward. Headline indicator number 4, non-domestic building fires. There were 5 incidents with non-domestic properties, which is above the average for the quarter, with 14 incidents in the year to date. This is 1 above the annual target. These are mainly in 3 within agricultural buildings, 2 hospitals and various other premises below that. Headline indicator 5, fatal casualties in non-domestic buildings. There were 0 for the quarter and 0 for the year to date. Headline indicator number 6, non-fatal casualties in non-domestic. Unfortunately, we had a single injury, which was light smoke inhalation at a fire in an agricultural building. There is only 1 non-domestic casualty for the year to date. Headline indicator 7, road traffic collisions. There were 10 incidents in Q4, which has seen us reach 53 for the year to date. Headline indicator 8, fatal RTC casualties. Again, unfortunately, there was a single fatal casualty within this reporting period, with also 1 in the last reporting period, Q3. This has meant we've had 2 fatal RTC casualties through the year to date. Headline indicator 9, road traffic collision non-fatal casualties. Within this quarter, we've had 3 RTC casualties, which takes us to 28 for the year to date. And I must apologise to those in the meeting. The figures stated on page 17 are inaccurate. So again, Q4 should read 3 casualties, not 5. Year to date should read 28, not 13. So the arrow for this graphic should be amber and not green. And beyond that, there's no obvious trends to where these injuries occur in location in Angus. Headline indicator 10, unwanted fire alarm signals. Within Q4 reporting period, there were 102 UFAS incidents in Angus, with a year-to-date total of 411, which is well above the annual target of 355. Within the annual UFAS total, the highest number came from the education establishments, being primary and secondary schools, with 100 activations for the year to date. Secondary schools were 54, primary 41 and preschool 5. The next nearest being hospitals at 16, then a single entertainment venue with 10, with 6 of these being across 11 days and 4 of those within 24-hour period. Headline indicator 11, deliberate primary fires. Within Q4, there were 2 deliberate primary fires. This brings the total number of deliberate primary fires to 38 for the year, which is over the annual target of 34. But I must add to that, 7 of these have been at a premise just outside Montrose, and due to the numbers, the Community Action Team intervened with 3 resident engagement programmes, which have had a significant and very positive impact with those involved, and have led to no further deliberate primary fires at that premise since the 7th of September 2022. Headline indicator 12, deliberate secondary fires. Q4 has seen 21 incidents across Angus, with the highest numbers being in and around Arbroath, with 10 incidents, with 3 of those being within a 30-minute period on the same night. Thankfully, colleagues in Police Scotland were quick to respond and apprehend the youth for setting these fires. Those involved are now in the fire setter intervention programme and are currently underway at the moment. Again, the majority of these fires were bins and rubbish containers, with being 10 and 6 within the grassland area. The year-to-date figures for secondary fires across Angus are 112, which again is below the annual target. If I can take members on to page 30 of the meeting pack, which is Appendix 1. This provides an insight into the work carried out by the very proactive community action team across Angus. Some of the support they have provided includes 21 hard of hearing alarms fitted, 52 home fire safety visits to support the crews across Angus. These will in general be carried out with local partners to ensure the needs of the occupants are met. Working closely with Angus Adult Protection and providing several presentations for all partnership approaching to hoarding and self-neglect members of the Protecting People in Angus Learning and Development Framework. 22 adult protection AP1 referral forms were submitted to Angus Council Social Work over this reporting period. And again, the Angus Lelo and Community Safety Advocates attended 6 virtual multi-agency case conferences involving persons identified at risk or vulnerable. Page 31 of the meeting pack, again, notable community events. We're very healthy in the Angus area with the community events, and some of the events we've seen are CPR training in Carnoustie, where 128 primary 7 children at Burnside and Carlogie primary schools received input on the life-saving skill, along with input, of course, of fire safety in the home. Bicycle marking event, again at Carnoustie, saw 133 bikes marked, again with colleagues from Police Scotland. Community engagement session at Carnoustie in partnership again with Police Scotland, allowing locals to raise concerns with both agencies on anything within the Carnoustie area. Again, Arbroath Crews worked with Arbroath Football Club to support the Arbroath Food and Donations Bank to restock emergency provision bags within Q4. 63 food and toiletry bags were provided to those most in need. Finally, Go Safe initiative at Brechin Fire Station saw primary 7 pupils from a local primary school receive input from both Scottish Fire and Rescue Service and Police Scotland on what their respective roles were within the community. And I think lastly, it's a must that, can I just please reiterate my thanks to all the employers that allow their staff to attend incidents on a daily basis at the sound of a pager, with Angus being primarily on call workforce, it's really appreciated from both a local and national perspective. So I'd like to pass my thanks on to those and the councillors that those businesses are within. Thank you. I'll take any councillor.
Thank you very much for that very comprehensive report. Thank you. We have a question from Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Convener, and thank you very much for that report. It's really sad to see the fatalities, and I just want to send condolences to people who've lost family and friends there. But in terms of the deliberate secondary fires, that is a really good result. I'm pleased to see that, but I'm also very aware that we're in an incredibly dry season, and we've got wildfires further north in the country, and I'm quite anxious about that, especially given the incidents we've had in my ward, particularly Kirriemuir and Dean, around some of the local beauty spots and people coming into the area and setting fire to trees and barbecues and things. And I know the really good work that Gary Wood has done around water safety with the community team. I wonder if you will have the resources available this year to perhaps spend a bit of time in a preventative frame of mind in some of those areas to try to prevent wildfires taking a grip in the more rural areas of Angus, please. I know residents have real concerns about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. I'll invite Station Commander Cami Sands to reply to that, please.
Thanks very much for your question, and also thank you very much for the praise that was put on Gary Wood there. I know he does a lot of work with the Community Action Team in Angus. To put you at ease, yes, I can confirm that the partnership approach to water safety group was stood up last year, and we looked at priority areas or risk areas within all three of the local authority areas and within Tayside. Lintratham and Backwater were picked up, but we've also spoken to other community groups and other members of areas to look for priority areas that we can engage with, and I can confirm that that is in the diary to ensure that we put out that kind of proactive message for the year and throughout. Thank you.
Councillor Devine, question. Thank you.
Thanks, Convener, and thanks for the report. I was just wondering, I mean, it again shows just how much partnership working you do, and I think we all appreciate that very much. I was just wondering if there are any plans for bike marking in Forfar, because I'm sure that our bikes are in danger here as well. One of the question I'd really like to ask, though, is about the 100 UFAs from schools. Have you got some idea of what that's about? I mean, I think the last time we talked about TikTok being at the bottom of a lot of that. Are you finding that again?
Thank you, Councillor Devine, for the question, and I can confirm that Forfar, I think either last week or the week before, had the bicycle marking scheme at the station. So a lot of bikes in Forfar should now be safe as well, or at least retraceable from there. Going back onto the UFAS, the schools, yes, we continue to see some antisocial behaviour within the schools. I can confirm that secondary schools, 11 of the activations were either malicious or accidental activations of the manual call points. Again, a number through 9 through smoking or vaping, and again 7 being aerosol use within changing rooms. So we continue to have these problems, but again we continue to work with the local stations, community action team, to try and get into the schools and educate those that are involved within that. And causing UFAS calls at these premises.
Thank you both. Councillor Proctor, a question.
Thank you very much, Convener. My question, because Councillor Bell beat me to the button, very much the same about the danger in the rural areas, and I think that's more or less been answered. But it is a concern for numerous constituents in Kirriemuir and Dean, particularly in the Lintratham area. I'd also just like to, I know you've put a letter out and we're going to have a discussion next week, but I just think I'd like to register the fact that numerous constituents have expressed concern about the potential withdrawal of equipment and resourcing in the neighbouring areas, because there have been occasions where in Angus we've had to rely on appliances coming from Dundee, Perth and Kinross. And I'd just like to register that, but I appreciate you're going to speak about that next week. Just finally, a point, I'd like to congratulate you on the report, and also it's great young people being involved again. That after COVID is really good and very encouraging, and thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I think the session next week will be helpful in helping you understand the process we followed to get to that decision making, and we're happy to answer any questions you have at that session. So hopefully that will be helpful. Again, and thank you for your comments.
Councillor Speed, question. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. And firstly, just to kind of echo Councillor Bell's words and sentiments with regards to those fatalities. It's always just kind of tragic to read that and seeing it on a report is one thing, but knowing the impact that will have to those families is another. And my late father was actually a firefighter, so I know just how that kind of, that loss spreads through the teams that are out there and how difficult it will often be. So thank you for all that you do within our communities to save lives. With regards to the stats and the non-domestic building fires, obviously there has been an increase there, albeit just slightly over the average. I just wondered how much concern is there around kind of the growing number of empty buildings, kind of commercial buildings, due to the fact of just, working lives, working patterns, use of buildings being different now than they perhaps were, a few years ago. Is that something that's likely to cause concern? Because we do know that when there's an empty building, actually the risk of fire is perhaps greater. And how often do you rely on, I guess, a response or backup from neighbouring authorities? Thank you.
Again, thanks very much for the praise for the service. With regards to the non-domestic properties, the community action teams will highlight buildings that are now void or vacant. If there is a requirement for us to highlight that, then we will do so for a firefighter safety recognition for all our staff members. And then we would also try to work in partnership with either the local authority or the responsible person for that premises to ensure that it's secure or made as safe it can possibly be, or that there's a reduction in fire materials or fired materials that are available to cause any problems with that. That's ongoing throughout. And we also recognise that if anyone comes to the Fire and Rescue Service to highlight any buildings, then we would take that on and take it further.
And on your final point regarding resilience, we are a national service and appliances, so our operational control room in Dundee redistributes appliances as needed based on activity. So as soon as an appliance gets mobilised, they look to look at the resilience in that area and backfill as necessary. And again, we'll cover that in more detail next week. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Questions? Nothing online, Mrs. Melly, no? No. Okay, comments? Councillor Shepherd, thank you.
Thanks, Convener. Just thanks for the report, and I just wanted to highlight a couple of points on the community engagement. And great to see that Arbroath Football Club and the Fire Service are working together. And a total of 63 food parcels were used by the community, so that's obviously the needs there and the demands there, so great to see that on the ground. And the police drop-in earlier today, I mentioned the good work with the bike marking event, and hopefully that's something we can replicate in Arbroath soon. So look forward to hopefully seeing that in a future report too. Thanks for all the hard work.
Thank you. Councillor Beattie.
Thank you, Convener. Just to echo my colleagues' praise there for the work that you've been doing, especially the Go Safe initiative in Brechin. It's been really good to see you at Mason Dew and the Play Spaces Nursery, just down the road from it. And I'm really keen to see how you get on at Andover and Edsall Primary Schools. So thanks very much for that.
Yes, and I would just like to echo the community work. We say it every time, I think, but it has to be said because it's excellent what you do, along with our police colleagues, and on this occasion, Arbroath Football Club. And there's others. We know there's others. So if you take it back to your colleagues that actually carry out these things, that our gratitude and thanks to you all for your community work that you do. Thank you. Members, we're asked, the recommendations are here to note and comment. I think we've done that. Do we note this report? Okay, thank you very much. Agenda item number 5 is the Police Scotland Angus Local Policing Area Quarterly Report for the period 1st of January to 31st of March 2023. And we have Superintendent Wales, and no stranger to us, Chief Inspector Blacklaw, here today, so I'll ask them to introduce the report, and there may be questions for you both. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Superintendent Ian Wales. I'm representing Chief Superintendent Phil Davidson, who's on his happy holidays today. As I came here today, I was trying to remember when I last sat at scrutiny, and by my reckoning, it was 6 years ago that I sat here in a different guise. So it's nice to be back. I'm responsible for the operational delivery of all policing, local policing across Tayside. However, not a stranger to Angus, having served here most of my service and previously sat on both the Adult and Child Protection Committees in a previous role. So really glad to be here, and thank you for the invite. As the convener said, I'm joined by Chief Inspector Leanne Blacklaw, who is the local area commander for Angus and be well known to everyone, both around the room and online. So in terms of the policing report that we're presenting today, it covers the Q4 period up to 31st of March, and as previous reports, it provides performance update and associated contextual information against both the local policing plan, but it shows linkages into the national policing objectives, as well as also supporting the Angus community plan. As I'm sure Mr Davison has previously said, we would advise you around the impact of the coronavirus, and it continues to make year-on-year comparisons quite tricky, because especially for 5-year comparisons, where 3 of the years were very, very challenging due to varying levels of restrictions have been in place at different times. This will be the last report to scrutiny in the current format. As members will be aware, we're going to a new format, and that will be delivered at the next scrutiny committee. So I trust you'll all have had the opportunity to read the report, and I don't intend to go into the full submission. Chief Inspector Blacklaw will draw out some highlights for you, and then we'll both be available for questions. So, Leanne, I'll hand over to yourself.
Thank you, and thank you, Convener. Good afternoon, everybody. Again, this is my first in-person scrutiny or hybrid scrutiny, so it's good to be here and to see you in person. Just to go over some of the highlights then, because I know you'll have had time to read the report. So just starting with the summary page, we'll start with the violence, disorder and antisocial behaviour. So you'll see there's been a slight increase in the number of serious assaults reported this year in comparison to last year, which is a 7.7% increase, albeit that's 4 crimes. Continue to make sure that all of our crimes, all of our serious violence, our serious assaults in Angus are reviewed by our local CID and the detective inspector in there. And although the detection rate is showing a slight decrease, there are still inquiries which are live and ongoing. So again, hopeful that that will continue to increase as we get these results back. Welcome decrease in the robbery and common assaults this year in comparison to last year, and again a welcome increase in the detection rates for both of those. There's no trend or pattern to the number of robberies or the robberies that we've been reported, nothing to suggest that they're linked, and again a large number of those involve people who are known to each other prior to the commission of these crimes. The common assault total, that includes domestic abuse crimes as well as police assaults, which the emergency service assaults are noted separately, but that total includes those as well. We continue in Angus to focus on the prevention of violent crime, working with our partners in schools, with our domestic abuse liaison officers, and also targeting our nighttime economy with our high-vis patrols and early engagement with staff in these establishments to try and ensure that crime doesn't happen. Moving on to the acquisitive crime then, again another real welcome decrease in the number of housebreaking thefts to dwelling houses there, with a minus 9.9%. We're really conscious of the impact that this crime has on the victims when their homes are broken into, so it's good to see that decrease and also the increase in the detection rates. Our motor vehicle crime has an increase, which is relevant, the same replicated across the division and nationally. and we'll continue to work with our colleagues within Tayside, with our road policing units and out with the borders to prevent these crimes and also to identify those responsible. And like I've said in previous reports, often these crime types are linked to other acquisitive crime, sometimes housebreakings to dwellings, etc. So it is really important that this remains a priority for us. Our speeding, as you'll see, has seen a decrease, as has our drug driving. There with minus 54.9% with our speeding and minus 33% with our drug driving. Again, something that we focus on locally and also nationally and by our road policing colleagues. And it's just hoped that the message, that the preventative messaging that goes out is being taken seriously by our road users. Our colleagues from Fire Service have already mentioned the tragic fatality that we've seen in this quarter, taking the number to 2 fatalities this reporting year, which is in comparison to 3 last year, albeit again, thoughts are with the families involved. And moving on to the serious injury RTCs, with a welcome decrease by 20% this year in comparison to last year, where last year saw 50 people injured seriously and this year has seen 40. So Group 2 sexual crimes, a small increase of 8.2% and an increase in the detection rate. However, this again is a welcome figure in terms of us hoping to encourage the people to report the crimes that they are victims of, and we'll continue to work with our partners to encourage the reporting of this and domestic violence. And a number of these crimes involve other linked crimes where the perpetrator has been reported for various crimes against one or numerous victims. And finally, on the back page, we can see the snippet of the work that's carried out under the key activity by our mountain rescue teams and also our local officers in relation to vulnerability, covering missing persons, vulnerable persons reports that we submit, and the continued good work of the non-fatal overdose group. We continue to increase our local community engagements and working within schools, etc., and with our partners, including the fire service. And we'll continue to increase the sharing of this good work on our social media channels so that this can be recognised. And that is all for me. Thank you, and we'll take any questions.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bell, a question. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener, and thank you both very much for that report. And again, it highlights the value of all the preventative work that you do. I just wanted to pick up on page 64 of the combined pack, the possession of drugs stats. I've been party to a presentation around the use of benzodiazepines in Tayside and the gender issues that are emerging from that. For example, more women actually dying from overdoses, and I wondered if you are finding that in your possession recorded crime figures at all, and if you're in a position to divert women to things like the Glen Clover project, perhaps rather than go through a criminal process, because we know that domestic abuse often figures really highly in both drug use and women in the justice system. Thanks. Thanks, Councillor. Really good question. In terms of the stats for gender, I would need to look into that, and I'll come back to you with that. But a really interesting point, and it'll be really interesting to see the results of that. Really aware of the work that's done by the Glen Clover project, and it's really valuable to our community, and we do have links in with that project and the staff there and referral mechanisms through our vulnerable persons reports, which are shared with social work and in turn passed on. So we do attend at the project, our community officers, and try and get to know the staff and the people who attend there as well, and that's something that will continue. Thank you.
Councillor Beattie.
Thank you, Convener. I would just like to turn to page 68, the wildlife crime. I noticed that for this reporting period, it's the same number of crimes as recorded as for the previous one. But this time the detection rate's way down. Now, I appreciate that's only, that's one crime. Is this just because investigations are ongoing for those?
Thanks, Councillor. Yes, it is. It's investigations are ongoing, and a number of those crimes are protracted in nature. So hopefully we'll see the results going forward and an increase in these detections.
Thank you both. Councillor Proctor, question.
Thank you very much, Convener. Just one for Chief. We mentioned in with the fire service report about the ongoing sort of activities that have happened in the past as well, the sort of Clayton area, and I know that the Police Scotland have sort of teamed up with the fire and rescue service to make the effect of this and also work in a preventative measure. Can we get an assurance that this is going to continue throughout this year?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, you can have that assurance. We will continue to work with our colleagues, our partners, in terms of any prevention, and also will give areas passing attention as we can.
Thank you very much. I just could add a comment, Convener. Thank you for the excellent informative report, and it's actually good to see the improvement in drug possession detective rate, which is shows that work is ongoing and very worthwhile. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Doran, a question?
Yep, thank you. My question relates to the use of electric scooters, and this has been coming up within the Montefiore community, and I just wondered if there was there was a rise in the increase of electric scooters, and if incidents are occurring. I've heard of a number of near misses that have been reported to me through the community council, where they might feature in any reports, and if there's any activity around the safety and use of those in the community. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, so it's an interesting old subject because electric scooters are green and really good for the environment. However, as the current legislation stands, they're illegal. So to ride one on a road, you have to have insurance and a licence, etc., and you can't get insurance for them. So the long and short answer is they're illegal. There's schemes elsewhere in the UK where they're looking to change that. But I saw in the media as lately as yesterday that Parliament were going to recommend that all electric scooters must bear a registration plate, have insurance, and you must have a motorbike licence to have one. So is it an issue? Yes, it is an issue because we're aware of some people riding them at excessive speeds, and they can go some speed. I've seen them whizzing about myself. The difficulty for us as police officers is how you tackle that. It's very like off-road motorbikes that sometimes we get plagued with, particularly in some of the housing schemes in Dundee, very difficult to deal with. And we just need to look at some of the incidents that have occurred nationally recently where police officers have attempted to pursue motorbikes, electric scooters, etc., and the riders have come to an unfortunate end, and the criticism that is levelled at then police officers for was that the right decision to pursue. So it's a very difficult, thorny issue. We're trying to do some messaging around this because a lot of people do not realise that they're illegal, and I know parents that have bought their children electric scooters thinking it's the right thing to do and not realising that it's actually against the law. And particularly for people that are maybe 16, 17 and thinking of driving, there was a case in Dundee at the start of this year where a young person was disqualified from driving because he was on an electric scooter. And that has an impact on what we're trying to say to that age group is that's going to have an impact on you when you want to learn to drive cars. because you'll not be able to get insurance because you'll have had a disqualification. So to me, a lot of it's about education, educating the parents around the illegality of scooters and the dangers for the riders as well, because a lot of them don't wear helmets. I'm sorry that's went on a bit because it's a really convoluted issue. It's something that we are very well aware of and trying our very best to stop. But it's it's very, very difficult, especially with the parameters that we have in place around trying to stop people that are riding electric vehicles like this.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Shepherd.
Thanks, Convener. And also thanks for this detailed report. I just wanted to home in a little bit on the speeding statistics and the drink drug driving statistics. Regarding the speeding, there was, as mentioned by Leanne earlier, there was a drop of 54.9%, which is a large drop. And I just wondered if that statistic, I just thought it was maybe a bit too high on the high side. You know, like nationally, do you think we're seeing figures like that of 54.9%? Obviously, it's a welcome decrease, but I just wondered, is that a realistic figure? Or we're not, maybe not catching as many as we should, which is maybe affecting the statistics. But on the other hand, I have seen some enforcement, like for example in the Woodville area of my ward, so I just thought I'd try and get a bit more detail on that one if possible. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. So I'll answer that one. In real terms, we are still doing as much activity as we did before. What we are now changing our tack to is education and warnings, because that has far more impact. And speaking to my road policing colleagues, they're in total agreement with this. So previously, if you got stopped for speeding, you got a ticket and you got 3 points on your licence. And so we are still doing a lot of enforcement, but it's far more educational now. And we're getting far more results by stopping drivers and spending the time to say, do you realise you were doing this speed, etc., warning them, and their behaviour change, their statistics that their behaviour changes because of that. So I give you an assurance, we are not now detecting speeders, and you will see our road policing colleagues and our local officers out doing speed checks, but it's all about education. And that sits much better with the public as well, I have to say, if we stop them and point out what they're doing and educate them properly.
Thanks for that.
Thank you. Councillor Devine.
Thanks, Convener. I'm looking at page 60 and hate crime. I mean, we're very grateful that you're identifying racially aggravated hate crimes, and to see the latest decrease is really good. However, nationally, we know that there's been an increase in homophobic trans hate crimes, but we don't seem to have figures for Tayside and Angus, which I think would be helpful to know.
Thanks, Councillor. That's certainly something that we could take away and see if it's possible to have the statistics broken down for you and to provide you with an update. As the Superintendent says, the report will change in format going forward, so we'll adapt it, but we'll take note of that. Thank you.
Councillor Speed.
Thanks, Convener. I touched on earlier in our briefing antisocial behaviour, and I know the stats kind of are showing a decrease. However, certainly from contact from constituents in the Arbroath East area, you know, it's still a kind of common issue, and often perhaps what would be seen as quite low level and kind of disputes between neighbours and things like that, but the impact can be huge. I just wondered if, do you ever kind of, I know you do a lot of work with young people in terms of that preventative bit of work and encouraging kind of good habits when they're out in the community, but is there ever any works done with perhaps, I guess, adults in terms of supporting and developing that resilience in terms of how to, you know, workshops or one-off events, someplace that they can, I guess, go to and that you can support in terms of what steps they can take to try and manage those situations, or is there to do that? I know you've got competing demands and time pressures, but.
Thanks, Councillor. We've started up, and I'm sure you'll be aware of the increase in the number of community drop-ins we're doing as well, with Coffee with a Cop at sometimes advertised as, or various other forums. So like that would be probably an opportunity, or if the people want to get in touch with their local community officer. In terms of going into groups, like we go into schools and do a lot of our preventative work, and like we talked about the Glen Clover project, if you've got any suggestions as to groups or how that could be done, then I'd be willing to listen and work with you with that.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Okay, any further questions? No? No comments? No comments? Well, I'll make one just to thank yourselves and your colleagues for the community work that you do as well on behalf of this committee, because I know you work closely with your fire service colleagues, but I do follow your various Twitter accounts and see that the community work that you're doing. So on behalf of this committee, thank you very much. If you'll take that back to your frontline colleagues, please. Thank you. Members scrutinise this operational report. Is the report agreed? Okay, thank you very much. The fire service and police colleagues normally leave at this stage, but I wonder if you could possibly just stay for the next item, just in case there's any. My clerk reminded me item number 6, which is the joint inspection of adult support and protection, just in case there's any questions for you. And then after that, if you wish, you may go. Thank you. Mr. Armstrong.
Thank you, Convener. As the committee members are aware, there was a joint inspection of our multi-agency arrangements for adult support and protection, which took place at the end of last year and into early 2023. That report was published on the 31st of January this year and was reported in full to this committee. This report provides an update on the development and progression of the improvement plan required by the Care Inspector as a result of that inspection. So I'd like to invite Fiona Davidson up to the table from Health and Social Care Partnership, who's going to speak in detail about the report, and we'll take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Fiona Davidson, and I had the pleasure of coordinating the multi-agency inspection leading up to the inspection and during the inspection week itself. So this paper is to provide an update on the development of the improvement plan that came out following the inspection of multi-agency adult support and protection arrangements in Angus. Without taking up too much of your time, I would like to just provide a brief bit of background and context to this inspection before moving on to the improvement plan. So it was part of a Scottish Government improvement plan for adult support and protection nationally, assurance that adults at risk in Scotland are supported by local and national adult support and protection arrangements, with a particular focus on how social work, health and Police Scotland work collaboratively to achieve this, as well as some of our other partners such as Scottish Fire and Rescue Service and Trading Standards. So in Angus we had a team of 8 inspectors who were undertaking the inspection, and that was led by the Senior Inspector of the Care Inspectorate. And there were 5 scrutiny activities included in the inspection process. There was a staff survey, scrutiny of case records, focus groups, a position statement and supporting evidence. The results from the inspection were very positive. Our key processes were graded as very effective, demonstrating major strengths and supporting positive outcomes and experience for individuals. So that was the highest grading that we could get from the inspection grading itself. Our leadership was graded as effective, with areas for improvement and showing clear strengths supporting positive experiences and outcomes for individuals. So some of the real strengths that were highlighted were in relation to our strong management of risk across partners, highly effective delivery of key processes, and the Care Inspectorate did actually tell us that some of the best practice they had seen nationally was when they were undertaking this inspection in Angus. They also commended us for our person-centred, rights-based approach that was evident throughout our practice, and our positive response to the pandemic and the resultant increase in referrals that we were experiencing as part of that, alongside our considerable improvement agenda that was in place across Angus. So at the point that we had this inspection, there had been 19 inspections taking place nationally, and that allowed us to assess Angus's performance using a broad range of comparative data and indicators. And what that illustrated at that point in time was that Angus and the Borders were the only two partnerships to have received the top grade for their key processes, and Angus had the best scoring for protection plans. At that point in time, there were 19 areas that had been inspected for their key processes, but obviously there were still another 7 to go, so I'm not quite sure if we're still up there at this point in time. But overall, what that did was it brought Angus out as being the best authority in Scotland as measured by the Care Inspector's own quality indicators at that time. So following the inspection, there were 5 areas of improvement that were identified from the inspection. And you can see that on page 76, the improvement plan starts from page 76 onwards. And the other thing the Care Inspectorate did inform us about was that normally their inspection reports will contain 6 areas of improvement and 6 areas of strength for each partnership. Because the Angus partners had demonstrated such good key processes, then we had 5 areas of improvement and we had 8 areas of strength highlighted in our report. So really, the purpose of this report is to provide assurance that there is an improvement plan being developed and in place, and I can confirm that has happened. The improvement plan that you can see from page 76 onwards has been approved by the Care Inspectorate, the Adult Protection Committee and the Chief Officers Group. The 5 areas that it focuses on for improvement in Angus are in relation to consistency of our case recording, the quality of our chronologies, the quality improvement framework that's in place across Angus, the Adult Protection Committee's improvement plan, that's their overarching improvement plan, and strategic service user engagement. There is governance arrangements being put in place for progressing the improvement plan and the actions within it, and they have been agreed. So the Self-Evaluation and Continuous Improvement Subgroup, which is a subgroup of the Adult Protection Committee, have responsibility for monitoring the progress on these improvement actions and reporting those regularly to the Adult Protection and Committee. And there has been some progress already made on some of those actions. For example, on page 81, action 3A, you'll see that the Health and Social Care Partnership were asked to accelerate any improvements that were still outstanding from a single agency audit in 2020. So those actions have all now been completed. On page 82, action 4A, that relates to the Adult Protection Committee Improvement Plan being refined and sort of tested, and that has also now been completed and is currently being implemented, and it will be reviewed later on in the year to see how that's working. There's really robust governance arrangements have been put in place as well for the monitoring of progress on the overarching improvement plan. Finally, I would like to draw people's attention to the improvement action number 5 on page 83. I think it's important to put that action into context, and that action is in relation to strategic service user engagement and awareness raising, and that was recognised as an area for improvement following the inspection. So it's important just to the focus of that improvement action is about strategic service user engagement. We were actually commended throughout the inspection for the service user engagement that happened throughout adult protection processes. So when we were actually dealing with families, dealing with individuals, we were commended for the engagement and the efforts that staff made to actually make sure that, and they were very creative, was the feedback in relation to making sure that people could be engaged meaningfully in a way that suited them, looking at different ways of communicating, different venues, etc., that took place. The improvement is in relation to looking at how do we involve service users more in strategic development of adult support and protection. And what has been put in place at the moment is that the Independent Advocacy, Citizen Advocacy Steering Group and the Angus Adult Protection Committee are planning to deliver several events throughout 2023. And that's as a starting point just to engage people using services that have got experience of adult support and protection and various stakeholders to explore how they could further engage and encourage involvement in strategic service user engagement. And that will hopefully complement the Adult Protection Committee service user involvement and participation strategy that was just developed last year, and also the human rights video that was developed through the Advocacy Service and the service user participation training that's already in place as well. They're all fairly recent developments though, so we're still obviously to see if the implementation of them has been effective as well. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Fiona. Councillor Bell, a question. Thank you.
Thank you. As chair of the Angus Health and Social Care Partnership, IGB, I really value the work that has gone into this. Could I pick up on 5 on page 83, please? And the exploring links with key groups such as dementia meeting centres and carers' voice networks. Would that work potentially also include some awareness raising around the public protection escalation routes and when third sector organisations perhaps escalate a concern about either a person using the service or a carer, that is I guess treated appropriately and responded to very quickly. I do wonder, I've had some feedback from some services that might not be happening all the time. And I guess it's about that trust, being a partner organisation and people hearing those concerns and treating them as valid straight away. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. Yeah, that's a very important point, so thank you for raising that. I mean, yes, undoubtedly, part of this work can look at raising that awareness across the board and making sure that people know how to act quickly and what to do if there are concerns. However, I also think that rather than wait until this work starts progressing, that's something I would be happy to feed back to the Adult Protection Committee and look at more general awareness raising across the piece for that, maybe within a quicker timescale.
Brilliant, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Speed.
Thanks, Convener. Thank you for the report. I think it really is should be noted just how pleasing it is to hear that Angus have come out top nationally, which is really comforting, especially given the remit of this work. I just note on the improvement plan in terms of training and development. That obviously will be really key to help ensure that Angus kind of remain in that top place. It does say that there would be known barriers to improvement, but we know that there's huge workforce challenges, not just within health and social care, but our partner agencies as well that are key in this piece of work. So I just wondered, why it said no barriers, but also in terms of that training and the delivery of it. I noticed that there is some timescales within there, and there's training sessions about to commence, or maybe already have. But is there any targets in terms of like how many people that you're hoping to go through that training?
Thank you, Councillor Speed. The training is taken forward through a subgroup, the Learning and Development subgroup. It is very comprehensive, actually, the training that's been put in place, and there has obviously been a big priority put on that and continues to be put on that. I don't know what the targets are. I would need to go back and speak to them and get that information for you, but can certainly do that.
Any further questions? No? None online? Okay. Comments? Yes.
On behalf of the Fire and Rescue Service, I think it's great news. Having worked in Gary Wood's position previously, I know how much work goes into that and ensuring that the collaboration continues on for those most vulnerable. Again, for us, we've done a bit of learning out of that, ensuring that our AP1 or our adult protection forms are continued to go in on time, and we'll make sure that anything or any vulnerable people that we meet will ensure that it meets itself with the social work requirements. With regards to the training, I'll commit the community action team from Angus, or I'll give them the full commitment to continue on with the hoarding and social neglect training. Again, the Tayside policy for hoarding and self-neglect, and also the risk awareness training that we've started on. And with regards to governance, if there's any information sharing protocols required going forward, then we'd be more than happy to help out on that side as well.
Thank you very much. The training is a really good example of effective joint work.
Thank you both. Anyone else? Councillor Devine.
I just wanted to say congratulations to your whole team, Fiona. It's a very diverse area that you're working in, quite a challenging one. So I congratulate you on coming out so well, and I'm sure you've made a lot of start on the improvement plan already, and I'm sure we'll get further details at a later stage. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Devine. Yes, and I would just like to echo what our fire service colleague said, and Councillor Devine, Fiona. Just thank your colleagues. It's a very complex area you work in, and for Angus to be top, it's excellent. So pass on our thanks for them. Members were asked to note the contents of the report. Is that report noted? Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
And if our police, yes, they're ready to go, Luke. Thank you very much. Okay, members, the next item is agenda item number 7, Internal Audit Activity Update, and it's Mrs Wiley, but we also have Paul Kelly online for the CMIS audit only. So thank you, Mrs Wiley. Thank you.
Thank you. This is the activity report, which is bringing you up to date with where we are with the 2022-23 plan, the items that have been finalised since we last reported to you, and an update on where we are with the implementation of actions. So starting on page 91, we have the plan for 22-23, including the items that were brought forward at this time last year. And as you can see, we've substantially finalised the plan in terms of the items that are coloured in there as being completed. The majority of the other items that we haven't managed to get finished for today are either out as draft reports or have been at the point where the draft reports in the process of being reviewed, and we should have that out hopefully within the next week or two. There are 4 items, they're on page 94 and 95, where we have PDR appraisal system and the mandatory e-learning courses are in the planning stages at the moment. We're thinking that we might move that PDR appraisal system to being a consultancy piece of work because there's some change planned there, and we think the timing of this audit might help us to help the service move that on. The other 2 areas that are not complete, that aren't at draft report stage, are
sorry, I'll get down to the bottom there. Yeah, organisational resilience, which was carried forward from 21-22. It was delayed because of the best value review that was undertaken by Audit Scotland, and then we've just not managed to get back to it. So that will be, it's being picked up again at the moment. We're revising what's already been done and deciding what the focus of that should be going forward, and that will be happening very soon. And the other one at the top of page 95 is the firm step post-implementation review. And just the nature of things, we just haven't got to that one yet, so it hasn't started yet, and we'll carry that one forward into next year. In terms of what we're actually reporting today, on page 97, we'll have the summary of the items. So there's all the updates in terms of the continuous auditing around creditors, payroll and system access, the IT user access admin for CMIS, random cash counts at Brambles Cottages and surplus assets. So if I start with the data analysis around the continuous auditing, for all of the payroll and some of the creditors, we're just updating for the January to March period because you've seen the previous periods in other earlier reports. In terms of payroll, we check top 10 payments and duplicate national insurance numbers, no national insurance numbers, and for duplicate bank accounts, and all of the instances that were identified were satisfactory. There was one incorrect payment identified in the top 10 payments in that period in March. However, when we did the audit, it had already been identified by the payroll service and they were in the process of rectifying that. And so we've got comprehensive assurance around payroll for that continuous work that we carry out. In terms of the creditors' duplicate payments, there weren't any duplicate payments identified in January. There were duplicates identified in February and March, and most of these were down to errors occurring, and there has been some changes to the processes, particularly around the grants, to make sure that these errors don't occur again. But we're satisfied, having looked at all of those, that there wasn't anything wrong with what ended up being posted and happened, and everything was corrected. And so we've got substantial assurance here, and that's based on this 3-month period, but also from some of the errors that have been noted in previous reports. In terms of creditors where the same person registered and authorised the invoice, in this case we were looking at the whole of the year from March 2022 right through to April 23, and there were 20 instances of the same person registering and authorising either an invoice or a credit note. And that was undertaken by 14 separate people with a net total of £12,231. All of these were investigated and explained satisfactorily, and the explanations all related to the correction of errors where someone had put something through incorrectly and just corrected it without getting that authorised by a second person. System login access, that was undertaken at the 23rd of January, where we looked at people who had not logged in for the last 21 days and also people who had not logged in at all. There were fewer in this testing than there had been the previous time that we'd done this, because there's been an improvement in that there's now information coming from Resource Link to IT to help them to get people taken out of the system when they're no longer employed by the council. So we investigated 138 cases and identified 33 staff that had left council and 15 who now work in education and should therefore have separate school email addresses. And so that's all been passed on to IT so that that can be taken forward and these people can be taken out of systems that they shouldn't have access to anymore. At this point, if that's okay, Convener, I'd like to hand over to Paul Kelly to do the IT user access and then come back to me after that for the rest of this report, please.
Absolutely, no problem. Thank you, Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Convener. Thanks, Cathy. So just taking you through this report. So this is, we always do an IT user access management review every year. This year it was the CMIS system, which is used within education for a range of things, including attendance management and pastoral care notes. Maybe what's slightly different with this system compared to other ones that we've done in previous years is that this is actually managed and developed entirely by CMIS, and a number of the core controls we typically look at would be managed by CMIS, so they were out of scope. So we just looked purely at what the council did. So overall, we're giving a substantial assurance rating. From the controls we looked at, there are 2 graded as amber and 2 as yellow, and we identified 10 recommendations in the report. 5 of which were priority 2 and 5 of which were priority 3. And in the key findings section, I'll perhaps just speak to the priority 2 findings, but happy to take questions later on any aspect of the report. So the first one there listed is that there's a need to review the contract with Siemens Group. What we found in looking at that was that it needed updating. It was referring to policies that were out of date, and all legislation was out of date. So, for example, it still referred to the old Data Protection Act as an example. So that's something the Council, in conjunction with the Siemens User Group and Siemens Group themselves, should take forward. We found some areas where there was shared user accounts for access to the system, primarily relating to supply teachers, recommending that everybody's given a unique login because the use of shared accounts does not allow accountability for use of the system and access to data. Final 2 points both relate to logging in the system. The first one relates to that while there is some logging, it only relates to log in and log off activities. At the moment, there's not information on what particular users do with access, and that's not visible to the Council itself. And recommended that the Council work with Siemens to identify how that can be enabled to identify any inappropriate system use. And the final part was about the retention periods for the access logs that are kept. There isn't any policy around that at the moment, and that should be kept for the minimum time possible, taking into account the business needs, security and legal requirements. I'll stop there and hand back to Cathy.
Thank you. The next item that we're reporting is the results from a random cash handling and cash counts that we've undertaken this year. This was something new that we added into the plan this year, just as a result of other investigatory work that had been undertaken through the counter fraud team. And so we had an unannounced visit to the residential establishments at Brambles. That was both Logan and Rowan cottages, and that was in January that we undertook that work. And that was as a follow-up to a counter fraud investigation into petty cash errors that had been completed in May 2021. And the review confirmed that all recommendations from that investigation had been fully implemented, and that there were robust controls in place to safeguard and record cash held on behalf of residents, as well as a high standard of recording and balancing of petty cash. And I think it's really useful to note that that was 2 years after the counter fraud investigation had taken place, so it's really good to see that there was still a high standard of the revised controls being in place and implemented properly. And the final item that we're reporting today is surplus assets. This was in the plan as something that we wanted to do because there was new guidance on the process for declaring assets surplus that had been implemented after the review that was undertaken on Lochside Leisure Centre. And we wanted just to make sure that that was being implemented properly. However, there haven't been any relevant assets declared surplus since that guidance was revised, and so there's nothing for us to test at the moment. But we will keep that in the audit universe, and we may test that in some point in the future. And then my final section is around the implementation of actions resulting from internal audit recommendations. And we're in a position at the moment where we've got 32 outstanding actions, which compares with 37 that were outstanding at the last reporting. It's possible that not all of the actions from the reports we've given you today are included in there because there's a bit of a timing lag with that, but they will catch up eventually. But really, there's good progress being continued to be made with implementing actions. Most of the actions are from 2021 onwards. We've got 4 from 2019-20, but they have revised dates of June and December 2023, so they are being progressed, and I have assurances that they should be implemented by those dates. And that's everything from this report, I think. Just to say there aren't any current counter fraud actions that are outstanding. They've all been cleared. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs Wiley. Are there any questions for Mrs Wiley or Mr Kelly? And none online. Any comments? Councillor Shepherd, thank you.
I just thought that I'd reiterate what Cathy said there, that it was good seeing the report that, like 2 years after the audit was carried out and the follow-up at Brambles Cottages, that all the procedures were being followed, all the cash was accounted for properly. So it's good to see that people, like 6 months after, that I get complacent, you go back to the old ways of doing things, that they were on point. Just good to read that in the report. Thanks.
Thank you. Is the report then agreed? Okay, agenda item number 8, and it's Mrs Wiley again, but Mr Ewan Ritchie is also online for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. This is one of 2 reports that you get in during the year, giving you an update with the progress of the work of the counter fraud team, and obviously this is summarising for the whole of the year up to the 31st of March. And we also have, as an appendix to this, an assessment against the SIPFA Code of Practice on managing the risk of fraud and corruption, which demonstrates that the Council and the counter fraud team are compliant with that good practice. The Council has a zero tolerance approach to fraud and corruption, and the counter fraud team is part of that approach, being a specialist investigation team that sits within internal audit and within the Strategic Policy Transformation and Public Sector Reform Directorate. And I just want to highlight a few of the things that are in the overview, but Ewan's obviously online, so he can answer any detailed questions that you have around the rest of what I don't speak about just now. Just in terms of fraud awareness, we had previously developed a counter fraud e-learning course, and that's still available to anyone within the Council. Ewan does go round and advertises that from time to time, and during this year there has been some specific training that's been undertaken around fraud awareness with officers from housing and procurement and commissioning teams. In terms of fraud risk, the Acker report indicates that the main risks for local authorities in terms of external fraud risk are in council tax, housing, disabled parking and business rates, and we take that into consideration when we are planning audit work and also undertaking other work that is done by the counter fraud team. There's also been a fraud risk assessment undertaken this year, which was done in conjunction with services, and we're in the process of getting that work incorporated into the Council's risk management documentation so that it can be more useful in terms of helping services when they're considering risks for their own service risk registers. In terms of the corporate fraud investigations, the team have formally investigated 10 cases this year in respect of allegations of corporate fraud, and they've included allegations of working time abuse, forged fit notes, undeclared conflicting interests, inappropriate access to council systems and secondary employment that was undertaken whilst absent due to ill health. When these are finalised, as a report goes to the individual services and appropriate action is taken, we will sometimes have actions that are agreed that are around systems, and in that case these will go into Pentana and be monitored along with the internal audit actions. In terms of council tax, there's proactive data matching techniques used to help us to undertake work around that, and in the course of this year's data matching initiatives, there's been a removal of council tax discounts or exemptions amounting to just over £122,500. The National Fraud Initiative is something that is undertaken every 2 years, and so last year, in the end of 2022, we put in the data information from the Council to be run through the matches with the other organisations involved in the matching, and we're now in the process of undertaking a review of what's come back from that matching. We normally get all of that information at the beginning of the year and then we work our way through it. This year it's come in batches, so we still have some of that information to come to us. I think it will come in the autumn, but once we've finally made our way all through of that, there's an annual report comes in and gives you an update on what that's found in terms of the Council, but I don't think there's anything of particular significance being identified so far. In terms of housing tenancies, we've undertaken a few investigations in partnership with colleagues from the Housing Service, and those have led to the return of 3 council properties back for the Housing Service to use. We've also looked at some cases where there have been allegations of fraud around school placements, and there were three situations there where we identified that school places had been based on false information where no automatic entitlement to a school place had existed. And lastly, serious organised crime is an area where we've been strengthening the arrangements that we have in the Council to deal with this. There were awareness sessions arranged where Police Scotland came in and did presentations for staff, and I think members were also invited to those. And we're continuing to keep that in focus and reminding people about that. And there was also a specific session done in terms of serious organised crime in the waste sector earlier this year. So just in conclusion then, the counter-fraud team will continue to work with service colleagues to prevent, detect and investigate suspicions of fraud, and that will be with reactive work but also with proactive work. And just the final bit there around financial implications, there were recoveries in excess of 134,000 identified in the current year, and that doesn't take into account any future losses that might have accrued if that hadn't been corrected in this current year. And that's that report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Wiley. Comprehensive, as always. I have a couple of questions. On page 108, the top ones, 4.7 and 4.8, housing tenancy fraud and school placements based on or not declared or false declarations. The housing tenancy, can you give me an example of what housing tenancy sort of exact fraud is? And also, as far as a school placement goes, if a pupil has got a place in a school based on a false declaration and you find that out, which you've obviously done here with what happens to that pupil that's in that school that it's not in their sort of catchment area or they're into that school because of a false declaration? Do they have to apply to the school that they're in, or are they automatically moved to the catchment school? Thank you.
I'm going to just do a body swerve here and hand that one over to Ewan, because he'll know the detail of the items that we'll have investigated this year and he'll be able to answer that
thank
better.
you. Thank you. Mr. Ritchie, thank you.
Forgive me. Thank you, Convener. Fraud that we come across most typically would be instances where the council tenancy is unoccupied, is vacant, and the tenant doesn't use it as their main or sole address. And that's the bulk of our work in housing tenancies. As far as school placements are concerned, our exercises that we've taken on, we did occasional reactive work with allegations that false information had been supplied in respect of a school placement. And that led us to work with business support staff to set out a proactive initiative. Now, what we do is prevention with fraud prevention is always far better than finding out that a fraud's on the go. So what we've done with the school placement is we'll look at a limited selection of primary 7 to S1 transfers, and we've been able to identify a number of these were based on false information, and we've been able to correct the school placement discrepancy before the child actually started school. I've no knowledge or experience of any child being removed from a school on the basis of their application.
Thank you very much, Ewan. Any other questions? No, nothing online. Comments? No. Okay. We have the recommendations in front of us. There are 2. Are they agreed? Thank you very much. And agenda item number 9 is the Internal Audit Annual Report and Review of Corporate Governance. And Mrs. Wiley again, thank you.
Thank you. So this is now the annual report, which does cover some of the information in my previous activity report, but it's covering the whole year, so I'll try not to duplicate information here. I'm starting off on page 126. I'm required to produce this annual report by the Public Sector Internal Audit Standards. I'm required to give an annual opinion, and I'm also required to report some other things to you, so I will run through these as well. So on page 126 at paragraph 5, you can see that I have said that in my opinion the Council has a framework of controls in place that provide reasonable assurance regarding the organisation's governance framework, effective and efficient achievement of objectives and the management of key risks, and proper arrangements are in place to promote value for money. In addition to that opinion that's required by SIAS, the Council has also asked that I conclude around the local code of governance, so that's at item 7, where I've concluded that the local code of corporate governance is adequate and effective, and although some areas for improvement have been identified, the code is complied with in all material respects. And while I'm speaking about that, I'll just make the observation around the fact that there have been a number of things that have happened throughout the year to improve governance, and that includes enhancing overall governance arrangements and taking forward improvements around performance management and risk management, both the action plan as areas for further improvement, but that doesn't mean that nothing's happened during this current year. In terms of risk management arrangements specifically, I've concluded that these are reasonable. Again, there's been work done this year to take that forward, particularly around the service risk registers. However, the pace of some of that has been a bit slower than had originally been anticipated. And in terms of service risk registers, there's still a wee bit of work to be done around that. And we also need to define our risk appetite as a council. And once that's been done, we'll be able to complete the scheduled review of the risk management strategy, which has been delayed pending that risk appetite being fully finalised. There's information there about the basis of opinion, because I don't just take into consideration the information that's been provided by the audit reports that we undertake, but I'm not going to go through that list. You can ask me questions about it if there's anything in particular you want to ask more about on that one. During the year, the services continued to be delivered by the in-house team, supplemented by the team from Assets who have provided a contract for IT support. And during this current year, they've also given us a little bit of general audit support because we had an auditor on secondment. And I have got some information about the resources at the top of page 129. We've had a number of things that have impacted on the resources in the team this year, all of which have had a net negative impact in terms of the time available. The first one is that since October, I've been working 2 days a week with Dundee City Council on a shared arrangement. And as I've just said, we had an auditor who was on secondment. We did put some mitigating actions in place to reduce that, but there was still an impact in terms of a 0.3 full-time reduction in availability as a result of that. We've also got one member of the counter fraud team who's currently seconded in finance for 0.2 full-time equivalent of their time, and that arrangement's in place until August. But we have got another member of the team who is working extra time to make up for some of that. And illness also impacted in the team for several months, and that resulted in approximately 0.25 of a full-time reduction in the available time. I am content that the amount of time that we've had in 2022-23 has not meant that I've got any limitation of scope or any issues with being able to provide my opinion this year. You can not just look at 1 year in isolation when you're thinking about what you're doing in terms of that opinion. It's true to say that for the last 2 years, so this is the 3rd year now that we've had members of the team on secondment for one reason or another. And so I think going forward, if we do have further secondments, we do need to think about how we replace that time in full rather than only partially. But we'll obviously look at each individual situation on its own, but I think it's just fair to lay that down now as something that we really need to think about going forward. In terms of the arrangement that's currently in place with Dundee City Council, that will be reviewed before it finishes in September to see whether we carry that on, and if we're going to carry on, then the resources that need to be made available to make that work will be considered as part of that review. Other things that I need to confirm to you just that all the members of staff that were involved in each of the 22-23 internal audit reviews were independent of the area that they were undertaking the review of, and their objectivity was not compromised in any way. I've also got some information there around some of the performance management indicators that we're using in the services of internal audit and counter fraud. So there's a SIPFA Directors of Finance section efficiency indicator, and that shows that we discharged 95% of planned productive hours compared with 100% in the previous year. The target is to achieve at least 95%. You may remember in previous years it quite often goes over the 100% just because of the way that's calculated. But that lower figure this year is just because of the fact that we've had some reduction in the available people to do the work. The next one is conformance with public sector internal audit standards. We must have an external review done every 5 years, and the last one was reported maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and that said that we did conform with the standards. We do an annual self-assessment in between times, and the one that was undertaken in April 2023 by myself and the team confirmed that the service was still in conformance with the SIAS. There's also a SIPFA statement on the role of Head of Internal Audit in public sector organisations, and also the counter fraud team, the SIPFA Code of Practice on managing the risk of fraud and corruption. And it isn't just the teams, but also there are elements in both of these about the council as well, and we do comply with the good practice in both of those. And then there are a couple of counter fraud investigation and recoveries figures there. These are items that the counter fraud team has complete control over, but it's useful just for you to see the comparison of these year on year. During this year, the main improvement that's been made is around continuing to develop the mapping of available assurances to inform the audit planning. There's still a bit of work to be done with that, so that's still sitting outstanding in the action plan, but we will move that forward once we get into the planning stages for next year's audits as well. So very briefly then, I'll just move on now to the results from the current year. As we spoke about previously in the activity report, we have completed almost all of the work, although we haven't been able to report all of it to you at this stage. During the year, there were some changes made to the plan. We took procurement out of the plan and postponed that into 23-24. That was partly because of the stage that the service were at with changes that were being implemented, as well as the fact that we needed to identify something to bring our workload back to be more manageable. And we also took out the consultancy review of service design work with external consultants, and that was taken out on a risk basis again because we knew that there was other work in the council that was being undertaken that would make sure that that was taken forward, and we didn't feel that that made that therefore a high risk to be removed. We also had an audit added during the year, which was a payroll audit that was added at the request of the service. So, as we've already discussed, we haven't quite managed to finish all of that work, although most of the work that was carried forward from 21-22 has been completed. And that was because of the reduction in available time that we've already discussed. And also, this is something I've reported to you previously, there's still a continuing delay in getting information sometimes from services, and that can be at any stage of the audit, finalising the brief, getting the information to actually audit, getting the queries resolved, and also getting draft reports finalised. So that's just something that is a symptom of the workload that the services are facing. But despite all of these things that have kind of reduced the planned work and the planned resources available and the planned assurances available, I have concluded that I can provide my annual report without any limitation of scope. We've got the table again, which has got all the results. This time it's actually got the number of actions included as well, but I don't propose to go through that in any detail. I'm just going to scroll through it and get to the next one. There's also a note there of the items carried forward and the items that are at draft report or draft under review stage, but we've already spoken about all of those. So just a very brief mention of items that we did this year where we didn't get full or comprehensive or substantial assurance. There was an adults with incapacity follow-up that was assessed as providing no assurance, and at the moment we're in a position where there's been significant work undertaken by the service to make sure that that priority one action, which was to review the whole system, is being taken forward and is progressing well. The other one was the procurement exemptions from tendering, which was assessed as providing limited assurance. We've already got 7 of the actions from that which have been completed, and there are 2 actions still outstanding with a priority 2 assessment, and they're due to be finished by the end of June, and there's a priority 3 action which has a December 23 deadline. Looking also at the priority 1 actions from and other actions from previous reports that had been limited in earlier years, the IT user access administration, again, we've got 2 priority 1 and 2 priority 2 actions which are remaining incomplete at the moment, but they have revised due dates of the 30th of June, which the service has given me assurances will be achieved. And we also have an IT interface report with 2 priority 2 actions with a revised completion date of December. And again, as far as I know, these are on track for that new date. Generally speaking, I would say in terms of the overall discharge recommendations, although we have a slightly higher number of outstanding recommendations this year than we did last year, it's well within the sort of rolling figure that I would expect to see looking at a 4-year average, and services have continued to address their outstanding recommendations. In terms of priority 1 actions, last year there were 4 outstanding, and there are still 4 outstanding, but 3 of them are the same, 1 of them is not. And we've just spoken about all of those priority 1 actions in terms of them being complete by the end of June or December, so I don't think I need to say any more about that. But from my perspective, it means that we're seeing progress with making sure the areas where we've identified risk, that's been addressed. And I think that's maybe all I need to say about that one. Thank you.
Questions? No. Councillor Devine.
Thank you, Cathy. That's a lot of information there. Thank you very much. And given all the difficulties that you've got, staffing and on both sides, on the audit and in the services, I congratulate you on being able to get so many of these reports completed. I was wondering, I mean, we've been trying to get risk management embedded into departments' services for quite a long time now. What, in your opinion, is the main reason for that not happening? Is that to do with lack of staff or loss of experienced staff, perhaps? Would you be able to pinpoint that?
We haven't done a specific audit on that, so I'm not able to really comment on that. I think resources definitely had an impact on people being able to move that forward, and it has moved forward significantly. We do have a number of registers that are complete. We just still have a couple that are not complete. I don't know if there's anyone else who's here just now who might be able to comment more on that.
Thank you, Convener. Really just to reassure the committee and elected members that certainly through the risk team and their alignment with the Health and Safety Corporate Consultative Group, there's a lot of energy and effort going into training staff across all services in relation to risk assessment, and then, as Cathy's detailing, embedding that in the whole kind of approach that services have to how they monitor and continue to kind of assess risk within their service areas.
Thank you. Councillor Speed?
It was just really a comment, if that's okay, Convener. If there's
yes, we'll go
questions.
Comments now. I don't think there's no questions online, none in the chamber. On you go with comments. Thank you.
Yeah, it was really just in relation to the secondment situation, or secondments, and just I think the importance of the review of that going forward, and just really how sustainable that is without it starting to really have kind of real knock-on consequences. And thanks.
Thank you. Yes, and I mentioned this a couple of times as well. The exact same thing at pre-agenda, but I'm very reassured by what Cathy said just now. When the arrangement comes up for review again with the other council in August, our staffing levels, I think, will be looked at that time. So, yeah, thank you. Anyone else? No, we've got the one recommendation in front of us. Do we agree to note this report? Okay, thank you. Okay, agenda item number 10, Mrs. Wiley. Again, reports relevant to the work of the Scrutiny and Audit Committee. Thank you.
Thank you. You'll be glad to know I don't have a lot to say about this one. Just to say this is here for your information, and it's an opportunity. If there's anything in there that you think that you want to know more about, you can ask and we can bring something to a future meeting. Otherwise, it's just there for your information.
Any questions? No. Comments? No. Is this report agreed then? Thank you very much. And agenda item number 11, Mrs. Wiley again, proposed detailed risk reporting to the Scrutiny and Audit Committee. Thank you.
Thank you. For a change, this one isn't actually bringing you a risk to be discussed today, but this is the programme for the coming year, and it's really just an opportunity for you to say whether you're happy with that programme or if you would like to see any changes to it. And that, yeah, that's. I don't have anything else to add to that, really.
Thank you. Any questions? No. Comments? No proposals for anything alternative? No. Okay then, thank you. Is the report agreed? Thank you very much. So the next agenda item is agenda item number 12, members, and it's SIP for guidance for audit committees. Mr. Cargill is going to introduce this one, but we also have Mrs. Vivian Smith, who is with us online. Thank you, Mr. Cargill.
Thanks, Convener. I'll give Cathy a wee break. Yeah, good afternoon, members. This report is really to share formally the revised guidance or the updated guidance from SIPFA, which was introduced in 2022. This was we did share the position statement as in Appendix 1, but we did share the whole package of guidance with members of the committee in advance of the self-assessment meeting that took place on the 28th of March, and we actually used the 2022 guidance for that session. So we're on top of that guidance, if you like. There is also going to be an update to reflect the new guidance in the order of reference of committees and the standing orders, which is a piece of work that Alison Watson and her legal team are taking forward. And so any changes in the standing orders and such like to reflect the 22 guidance will be picked up there. Maybe just highlight in section 3.4 of the report, just to give members of the committee a flavour of the main kind of changes. I think the Council, as I've said in the report, already has a high degree of compliance with the SIP for guidance, and it's more of a tweaking than major overhaul, really. But these are the key points that have been updated, which are set out in section 3.4. So it was really, with the fact that members have seen the guidance and obviously seen the position statement as part of the papers today, if there was any other areas for improvement that the committee would wish to see addressed as part of that updated guidance, then be happy to hear that. That's really it.
Thank you very much. Questions? Any comments or proposals? Any specific areas you want to look at? No? Councillor Devine, thank you.
Thanks, Convener. Again, it's looking at independent members for this committee. I mean, we've talked about this before, and I think we came to the conclusion that we really didn't think we wanted to go ahead with it. Is there any need for us to do that? Because SIPFA is recommending that each authority, this is page, 156, should include at least 2 co-opted independent members. And have we got any ideas of the areas that they would consider useful to us?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Councillor Devine. I think this is an action that actually came out from the self-evaluation that we did on the day, and I think it was something that Cathy and I were going to go and take a look at and investigate a bit further and come back to members with our findings, just based on probably what other authorities do and what's best practice there. So we'll carry out that piece of work first. The other bit that was really important as part of that self-assessment work was really a look across all the kind of the skills and knowledge and experience that members of the committee already had. And I think overall terms there was a good, there was nothing jumping out really that was a major issue. So I don't anticipate there being a requirement for independent members to come into the committee, but it's someone we'll have a look at, and if there is a need for it, we'll bring it back to members for consideration.
Thank you. Councillor Dorn.
Thank you. Mine's more of a comment, really, just following up on that. I know that we've discussed previously around the fact that the kind of items which are addressing technology, and as that becomes more complicated, important for us as elected members to make sure we're on top of that and the ins and outs of that. So I just wanted to add in a comment following on from that question relating to that area, but I presume this is something that would be looked at as part of that investigation that you're doing there. And it is something that's been raised previously as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Any further comments? No. Okay, we have the recommendations in front of us. Is this report agreed? Thank you very much. Agenda item number 13 is the Local Government Benchmark Framework. It's quite a big title, and I think Mr. Lorimer. Oh, Mr. Kirgill. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, convener. I thought I'd take this one as well, seeing as I was here. So this is is a long title, the Local Government Benchmark Framework National Benchmarking Overview Report 21-22. So it's a kind of a year behind in a way. So some of the data has been updated since then, but notwithstanding that, it is a really important report that's produced by the Improvement Service and covers a whole range of council services in a fair bit of detail, and has obviously key performance indicators associated with it, which give an analysis and trends around how councils are performing in these various areas. There has been a fairly major development this year in the way that information is presented. The actual covering report itself was becoming a fairly weighty tome, I think, if members can recall it last year. But the Improvement Service have now moved it towards a lighter touch covering report, and have brought forward the use of the Power BI, Microsoft Power BI digital reporting tool, which they've now presenting the data through that format, which is providing a huge opportunity there to go in and analyse the information, look through the information, and find out quite a bit of detail. So that's something that I think members, if they've not looked already, I'd be more than happy to arrange a session where I could take members through that, if that would be useful, because there is more and more performance information that's starting to be presented in that way, so that's something to consider. The other bit in the report that really to update members on is around our progress with our performance-led programme, and there's a section in the report which, towards the end of the report, which gives us an update around how we're progressing there. Stages 1 and 2 of the report, of the performance-led programme, are now fully complete by all service areas. They've gone through the first round of that, if you like, but it's now important that we don't sit back on our laurels there, and actually we start to really embed that as a full sort of planning and performance cycle, which is embedded in the ways of working, and also for interest for this committee in particular, followed up on to get assurance that directors have followed the process throughout the year as part of the governance assurance that we do each year. So that's moving forward and in a positive direction. And the further stages of PLED, which is stages 3 and 4, which is always going to be the next phase where we're wanting to start to make and drive better value from the use of our data across the organisation. We've done a bit of work with the Scottish Government around the data maturity assessment, and information coming back from that is helping to inform how we'll take that forward as an action plan and roadmap, so that we start to really maximise the value of data that we have in the organisation. The other bits in the report, really just to highlight that we have put in within the, in response to the LGBF information, there is a chart within the paper which gives a kind of an overview, strategic overview, if you like, around, across all the indicators, how the council is performing. It's kind of linked to the approach that Audit Scotland took in the Best Value Audit report, where we're looking at overall changes, and you can see that there's, in the first quartile, we've seen some improvement there, albeit in quartiles 2 and 3. There's a bit of a mixture there. So it's still a bit of a mixed picture, but heading certainly in the right direction. And we've also put some information into the report just to give members, a sense of the top performing areas, and also for balance in the reporting, the kind of the worst performing areas and ones that have deteriorated as well. So it's to give you that overview, and also the customer satisfaction survey side of it as well in a table there. So that's a kind of an overview of the report, and happy to take any questions.
Councillor Devine, thank you.
Thank you. I would certainly welcome a briefing on Power BI. I don't know what BI stands for, but also PLED, because you mentioned that 1 and 2 sections or stages have been already completed, but I don't even know what that is, what these areas are. So I think it would be beneficial for this committee to have a clearer idea of what that is, and what staff are having to cope with to do that.
Thank you. Councillor Dorn?
Yeah, thank you. I agree.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Dorn, can you just hold on? I omitted to let Mr Cargill answer Councillor Devine's questions. I'm jumping the gun.
I was a bit slow.
Thank you.
It's probably my fault, but yeah, the Councillor Devine, that would be excellent. I'd be happy to do that. I think there's a lot of information that we talk about, performance-led programming, and I think to brief members of the committee on what that's about, the detail of that would be helpful from my perspective. And if we could combine that with some updates on the Power BI, LGBF information, and there's other online information as well that I think might be helpful for you to be aware of, that you could have a look at. So happy to do that.
Thank you, and I'll get it right this time. Councillor Dorn, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think a briefing would be good. I just really wanted to kind of clarify. There's a few within this report. It's good that it has been presented in a shorter format, but I just want to raise a couple of things just to make sure it's clear what's being said in the report, because there was 2 things on the performance indicators and the worst performing indicators. Excuse me. We've got the percentage of rent due in the year that was lost due to voids, and then there's also the percentage of people 65 and over with long-term care needs receiving personal home. Now, I've got in my head a presumption of what those 2 actually mean in reality, but I was just looking for a clarification on that, because I presume our ranking falling on that is that people who want to receive care at home aren't receiving care at home, but it's not quite clear from the stats and the metric that was presented there. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Yep, thanks, Councillor Dorn. I'll have to confess the detail on the long care needs at home. I don't have the detail on that one, but on the other one, in terms of the rent due in the year that was lost due to voids, I have spoken to the new service leader in housing, Catherine Johnson, and she's identified actually a range of things that are causing difficulty there, not least, I think, the change of contractor, and then the legalities around that and what they can do and they can't do. And there's been various other contributing factors as to why that performance is where it is. But I think She's also given, wanted to give me, give the committee assurance that this is one of her top priorities now being in post, that she's going to be looking at the performance side of things and looking at the voids in particular and how they can make improvements there. So it's absolutely in hand. The other one, I'm not even going to try and give you detail on that because I honestly don't know, but I'm happy to pick that up. It's a pity that Fiona wasn't still here because she might be able to give you more information on that. But that's one that I'd be happy to come back to you on if that's okay.
That's fine, yeah. And I didn't know if you would be able to come back to me at this point on both of those, but it was also just about making it clear in the report what those actually kind of mean, because we've got a summarized piece here. So, and we've spoken before about kind of using terms that we might be familiar with, but others might not. So what does that actually mean? Rent due in the year that was lost due to voids. I know what that means, but I don't know if anyone else reading that. So it was just around that. And I just wanted to follow up with a comment, if that's okay.
Yes, I don't think there's any further questions, none in the chamber and none online. I think, Councillor Dorn, can we leave comments at the moment? Councillor Speed has a question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Convener. It was actually just a follow-up to Councillor Doran's question and Mr Cargill's response. From my recollection, in terms of the voids and the performance deterioration, there was already signs of a decline before the contractor issues. So I just wondered what other factors then would be contributing to that, and also whether generic working has had any impact.
Thanks, Councillor Speed. The information that I've had from Catherine Johnson around this is that she's says some issues that are being experienced nationally but are having a disproportional impact in Angus. And obviously the contractor issue she's saying it's impacted our ability to bring properties back into use. And I think that is down to some of the legal processes that are being followed on that one. She also talks about there's low demand stock, particularly in relation to sheltered housing, and void rent loss in sheltered housing is much higher. So I think that's having an impact on the figures. And the other one that she's mentioned and highlighted is around delays being caused by difficulties with energy suppliers and changing meters. So there seems to be an issue around that as well. So hopefully that gives you a bit more information on where she's coming from on that. And again, she's stressed within our message to me that repairs and voids are a priority area for improvement for the service over the coming months. So it's obviously something that's at top of her agenda.
Gordon, is it something that we can get? I mean, obviously Catherine's new in post and I get that, but Councillor Speed's right. We've been talking about voids since long before the pandemic, or there was construction and contractor issues. Is it something that we can get a figure on how many voids we have now and look at it? I'm not saying every meeting of this committee, but I think we need to see that improvements are being made to have these voids occupied, because every one of us in this room and on this meeting certainly have constituents that are looking for housing. And if we've got voids, we can't give them housing. And I think we need to see, we don't need to, this is fine, but I think we need to see figures, please, of just exactly how many voids we have now, and in 3 months' time, how many voids we have, and what's been done to improve that, please.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to take that one back to Catherine and bring that back to committee. The only thing I'm thinking there is that I don't know if there's that information that's already going to the Communities Committee, possibly. So there might be overlap there, but it could also come here. We can have a look at that, Convener.
Okay. Councillor Devine, yes, sorry.
Convener, just in relation to that, I mean, I know that it is high priority. We have discussed voids often, but over the past year or so, we have been actually making that priority. And I know that Councillor Braze has been talking, because he's the housing person, he has been talking a lot with Catherine about this, and I am absolutely content that, given the difficulties that we've got with materials, with labour, with inflation and everything else, but voids are top of the agenda.
Thank you. Councillor Dorn, comment? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It was just a comment relating to the stats around adult satisfaction with museums and galleries in the area. I know that this kind of covers part of the pandemic area as well, but it looks like ours, the score that we've got is lower than across Scotland. So it's kind of the benchmark that we're working against is still lower, even though it was during some of the pandemic years. So I think that's kind of disappointing, and it doesn't look like it's reduced the 2 dates, and there's no kind of improvement or change. So that's something that I think I would like to see more attention paid to.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dorn. Councillor Shepherd, thank you.
Thanks, Convener. Just while reading through some of the national benchmarking overview report, more just on the national picture, it's clear that in some areas we're far from fully recovered from the pandemic, and it's just a reminder that it's not business as usual. We're still feeling that impact as a society, and right across we'll have to work to counter that. And it's just a good reminder for everyone reading through that report that there's still a lot to do, nationally rather than specifically here in Angus. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? No more comments? Okay, is the report then agreed? Thank you very much. Okay, agenda item 14 is complaints raised with the Scottish Ombudsman, and Mrs Watson is going to speak to this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. This report provides information regarding complaints made to the Scottish Public Services Ombudsman in the 22-23 year period. You'll see from the report that 22 letters of complaint were received by the SPSO regarding Angus Council, and of these, 18 were not investigated by the SPSO. 1 was withdrawn, 1 was closed, and 2 remain outstanding at present. This hopefully provides members with assurance that in the vast majority of cases, the SPSO have deemed that the complaints procedure has been followed by the Council, the response is reasonable, and no further action is required. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Any questions? No, I think, Mrs Watson, you're absolutely right. If it was 22 complaints and we've only got 1 there just now, and the rest were the Council's dealt with properly, I think it's a very reassuring report, and I've certainly got no issue with it. Is the report agreed if there are no further comments? Thank you. Oh, sorry, Councillor Speed, on you go.
No, I was just going to make a comment to say that I would imagine that often when people make a complaint, like a formal corporate complaint, that perhaps by the time they've gone through the kind of council's complaint procedure, that they're perhaps a little bit exhausted by then, and maybe we're not really seeing a true reflection in that they're maybe not taking it that next step further just because they're exasperated by the end of it. And I have raised this issue before in terms of our complaints process, so maybe that's something that needs looked at in terms of it's not an easy thing for people to go through. And I know that the last time I raised this, there was to be a briefing, and I think that is due to perhaps be put together in due course. But yeah, I just wanted to make that comment because I think it can be quite a difficult process for people.
No, I accept that. We've already agreed the report. Mrs Watson, do you know if there's going to be a briefing? Is it being organised?
Certainly, I know that colleagues are working on looking at the complaints process continually, how we can improve that, and looking at the data. And certainly I'll take that back to Mrs Buchanan regarding the briefing, and we can provide an update. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Agenda item number 15 is the Corporate Governance Local Code of Corporate Governance report, and it's a report by Mr Cargill and Mr Armstrong.
Thank you, Convener. As the report details, it presents for the committee's approval the revised Local Code of Corporate Governance for Angus Council, which is this review of the code is undertaken on an annual basis. So what you have as Appendix 1 is the output of that exercise, where it's been revised and updated and is detailed within paragraph 4.3, for example. The revised version that's with you today includes reference to the Council's transition to net zero action plan. So it's really for the committee to consider and approve this revised local code.
Thank you very much. Any questions? No. Any comments? No comments. Okay, you have the one recommendation. Is the report agreed? Thank you very much. And agenda item 16 is the Corporate Governance Annual Review and Draft Annual Governance Statement for the year to the 31st of March 2023. Thank you again.
Thank you, Convener. So the report advises committee of the outcome of the annual review of compliance with the principles of good governance and presents for your consideration the draft annual governance statement. And it refers back to the reports that Cathy Wiley presented earlier. In terms of the report, the overall conclusion of the review is that during 2022-23, the Council demonstrated that the governance arrangements and framework within which the Council operates are sound and operating effectively, and that the Council is generally compliant with the core principles of good governance, including our local code of corporate governance. The report seeks approval to amend some of the dates in relation to the action plan, both for the corporate governance action plan and the best value audit actions. And I would also just stress to the committee that the annual governance statement is a draft statement, because we're still awaiting the full arrangements of the group, including Tayside Valuation Joint Board, Tayside Contracts, Angus Live and Angus Health and Social Care Partnership, but the final version will be incorporated within the annual report and accounts, which will be submitted to the Controller of Audit later in the year.
Thank you very much. Any questions? No. Any comments? No. Okay, we have the 5 recommendations. Is this report agreed? Thank you very much. And the final one is the agenda item number 17, Scrutiny and Audit Committee Self-Assessment and Annual Report, and it's Mrs. Wiley. Thank you.
Thank you. This is the draft of the annual report, which is from the committee to go to council after the recess. And this is, I think it's the 3rd or 4th year, maybe even more than that, that this has been undertaken. The report is slightly different this year because we've taken on board what the SITFA 2022 guidance for the committee has asked that should be included in this report. And so there is a section, for example, about external audit in here, which had not been there previously. But really, this is just a summary of what's the work that's been undertaken by the committee, the key points that have been raised during the year, some information around the self-assessment that was undertaken at the end of March, which we spoke about earlier on when we were talking about the new SITFA guidance. And it's really just an opportunity if any of you have any further comments on the draft that's been prepared before it's agreed, and then if it's agreed, the convener will sign it, and that will be that one done. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? No. Comments? No. Okay, we've got the recommendations. There are 3. Is this report agreed? Thank you very much for your attendance, and thank the officers for your input. And that's the end of this meeting. Thank you.
John, can you stop the live stream, please? Thank you.